also making a scene. And Emeka, class of 21, resilient 21. They really had to be resilient. So it's wonderful to see you guys joining. Feel free to say hello in chat. Would love to see your name and would love your questions for Dr. Juana Bordas. I've had a conversation with Juana for the podcast. Go
So
ahead,
I
Juana.
was going to say, for those of you who are noticing my white hair, I'm an elder in our community. But so my first leadership program was Leadership Denver, very much like Leadership Greater Washington. And I coined our phrase, and it's, you can expect more from 84. And here I am decades later doing more. So congratulations to all of you. Leadership is so important, and particularly the network and knowing people and working together and being able to share what you know and then, get some end results. And I'm also really excited about the fact that people understand that leadership really is about change and about having a vision for a better future.
It is, Juana, and it's just so magnificent. That even through this virtual platform, your energy, your enthusiasm, your joie de vivre comes across, and I love that. But before we get to power of Latino leadership and the multicultural focus you talk about, I think your origin story also plays a big role. And would love for you first to share a little bit about your origin story before we talk about leadership.
Oh, that would be great. Well, actually, my origin story is a leadership story because it's an immigrant story. And I think many times when we see the immigrants, cleaning the floors, cooking, putting the roofs on, doing the hard work, we don't realize that they're leaders, that they do have that vision for a better future. They are trying to leave a legacy for their children. And that really is the story of my family. My ancestors come from the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua, and in the 40s, there was a tsunami that wiped out the coast. And so my father went up to the mines and he ran the commissary in the mines in Bonanza, where I was born. If you all don't know what bonanza means, it means a bonus. So I was born in Bonanza, so I'm a bonus. Anyway, and so he saved money. And I come from a very large immigrant family, 8 of us. And so he and my older sisters came to the United States to earn money to bring the familia, which is a very old tradition. And I just want to, remind people, because we have such a hard immigrant state right now, how important immigrants have been to our country and how much they contributed to making this nation great. And so here, my mother comes, she has a 5th grade education, but she was a strategic leader. She had a vision, and her vision was that I would be here with you today, that her youngest daughter, who I am, would get an education, and nothing was going to stop her from getting her children educated. That's all leadership, that stamina, that determination, and the idea of leaving a legacy. And so she goes to the padrecito, the priest, and says, yo puedo cocinar, limpiar, cuidar niños. And I think how humble that is. I can cook, I can clean, I can take care of children. But then she closes the deal. She says, yo vení aquí, I came here so my children could have a better life. So see, it's such an incredible story, but it's a lot of people's story. And so cooking and cleaning, she made sure I got an education. And I have to say, as the youngest daughter in a Hispanic family, and I talk a lot about this in our work, we come from we cultures. And most cultures in the world are we cultures, where we understand that we've made it to where we are because we helped each other, because we cooperated, we worked together, we helped promote each other. And so I'm here today as a testament of that, of how my brothers and sisters all helped me when I was working my way through college, to become the first educated person in my ancestral line. And so I can't take all the credit at all, because when you're in a we situation, you do it with the group, for the group, with the support of the group. And I think that's the kind of leadership we want to bring forward into the world today.
And Juana, what a magnificent origin story and leadership journey. And again, I would encourage everyone to check out some of your background You are also on the faculty of Center for Creative Leadership, did get your PhD, have been involved in Latino causes throughout and
Yeah.
leadership.
Well, I have to say that when you come from the kind of background I come from and the kind of culture I come from, leadership is about responsibility. And my mentor, Lorraine Matusak, who was with the Kellogg Foundation, always used to ask the question, leadership for what? What is leadership? And I always say the purpose of leadership is to create a society that takes care of its people. I mean, if we can't take care of our people, right, then how could we be leaders? Whether you're talking about being in a corporation or an educational system or a nonprofit, you have to take care of the people that are part of the organization. And so that's really important to understand that many people have that sense of responsibility because so many people have brought us to where we are, our mentors, our guides, our parents, our grandparents, our ministers, our coaches. And so we have a responsibility to give back is the way I see leadership.
We do, Juana, and it's interesting that you mentioned that for a couple of reasons. One, the leaders involved in Leadership Greater Washington, most especially those who are engaged, who are participating, and who are listening in and watching you, have that understanding. But before we started recording and before you joined, I was actually having a conversation with Doug about some leaders in the community, and we see a lot of them who are more focused on what's in it for me, as opposed to what you just mentioned in terms of a focus of leadership being making it better for others and the community. Where do you see that challenge, and how do you see us being able to address some of those challenges?
Right. Well, it's the basic distinction in cultures, whether you're an individualistic, I-centered culture, and that can be an organization as well, or whether you're a we or a collaborative centered culture. And I think what we need to look at today is no matter how smart you are, with the kind of change and the kind of diversity we have, the idea that you have an educated work class now, no matter how smart you are, you don't have all the answers. You have to bring together a team. You have to create that intellectual capacity in your organization. So, yes, the way American Indians explain this to me is they say, like, you look at a beautiful basket that's been woven and think of you as a strand in that basket, that each strand has to be strong for that basket to be a container. And if, some baskets can actually hold water, that they're so tight. But in the context of your community, in the context of your organization, so yes, we want our leaders to be all they can be and to develop themselves and to have that sense of purpose. But in the collective and as a collaborative of how do we lift up everybody in our leadership process. And it's not an either or, you can be both. The question is leadership for what? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for the benefit of others or just for yourself?
So is that Juana, a pendulum that is swinging in that a couple of years ago with the pandemic hitting and everything else, there was more conversation about the need for we, the need for community, the need for purpose. And it's almost as if some of that pendulum is shifting, at least in some of my interactions with leaders of organizations being more focused on their functions, their roles, rather than more of a focus on we. Would love for you to go more into that I thinking versus we
Yeah.
thinking.
Well, I think you can't deny that one of the major reasons we're going through this shift is because of the advent of women and communities of color into leadership. Because women and people in communities of color, we are all we centered, and that has been true throughout history. And so what you're seeing now is a new paradigm. The old paradigm came out of the military, it came out of the industrial complex, it came out of organizational structures that were hierarchical. And if you talk to millennials, which is another incredible change, the change in demographics where, today the baby boomers are retiring at 10,000 a day. And millennials and Zs are going to be the new entries into the labor market, and they do not like hierarchy and domination and top-down leadership. They want to participate. And like I said, we now have an educated class in America. You know, so many of us have gone on and got our education and have incredible experiences to share. And so you really lose that sense of power from your people if you don't create systems and ways of people to come into teams and to collaborate and to share and to feel like people are helping each other and not competing against each other. Now, I realize there's some of both of that, but on the other hand, if you look at the complexity of the world, if you look at our globalization, if you look at our demographics changing, both within people of color, women, and young people, it's not going to work in the future. The best organizations are going to be the ones that tap into the power of their people.
So I buy into that. Over the past week or so, I've read at least 3 or 4 articles, Juana, about the death of DEI focus in organizations, and the fact that many organizations are now saying we don't want to associate with this anymore. In some instances, as a result of investor pressure, in other instances, because it's not in vogue anymore. So you are saying that with women, more people of color in the workforce, educated, involved, millennial, Gen Z, people want this. But
Yes.
I'm reading and I'm seeing sort of something counter to that happening.
Well, you know, whenever there's change, and I was happy to see how many people were into change and into really standing up for a different kind of leadership. You know, there's always a back and forth. Paradigm shifts. Women are a good example. You know, women got the vote in Colorado over 100 years ago, and we are just beginning to get into the higher levels of leadership, right? So paradigm shifts take a long time, and as they're changing, you have almost a resurgence oh yeah, let's look at the I leadership again. Now, I leadership is really important in a crisis. You can't stop and have a team meeting when when my IT's not working. You have to, you know, when you have a crisis, when you have something like COVID, you need a lot of hands-on leadership. So we're not saying it doesn't have a place. And also, if you're an expert, you know, you don't hire a consultant that knows how to do strategic planning and then sit there and tell them how to do strategic planning. So you know, it's you know, leadership is about context, about environment, about the people, and you have to have that sense of not only situational leadership and servant leadership, but the whole idea that you have to understand the environment in which you lead. And so different kinds of leadership are useful in different situations. But it's not surprising because you know, it's a little bit hard for people to give up that sense of I, that sense of power, that sense of I know better, that sense of you know, even I was born to do this. But it's much more fun to have a team and a collaboration and people who want to work for you. You know, they used to say, you know, you didn't have to like people that you worked for, but isn't it better to like them? Isn't it better to have a team that has a spirit of we're in this together? And then you look at the studies, you know, Stanford did a study on 800 teams. If you have an ambiguous problem, which means, you know, not the one where you here's the solution because I'm the accountant or I'm the engineer, you're going to get a better outcome when you have a team. You're going to get a better outcome because you're going to have different people coming from different parts of the organization with different talents, with different perspectives, experience, and you're going to get a better outcome. So it takes a little more time, but once people are on the same page and they've contributed, they can get the results done faster.
Now, one of the things you mentioned in terms of being able to do that and building on the Latino legacy, I don't know.
My picture just left, didn't it?
Yeah, your picture did just leave, but if you can hear me, we can
Okay, sure.
continue. As I know you were having some IT issues. You you talk about the power of your picture came back.
It said the host said to put on your video. This is an example of how we need a team here.
uh, we've got Jasmine does a beautiful job working things in the background.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you for your help, Jasmine. So you talk about a combination of Latino legacy and then drawing for all of us to draw on the power of our ancestry. What
Yes.
role does that play in leadership, especially as it connects to organizations?
Well, I think I've been reading a little bit about how America has amnesia. They forget, and I think when some of the Anglo-Saxons, the European immigrants came, they were told to change their name, to forget their language. They didn't go back and forth like a lot of the immigrants do today, especially in Central and South America, because it's closer. So America has never really had this idea of connecting with your ancestors, and yet across the world, whether you're talking the Asians or Dia de los Muertos with the Latinos or American Indians believing their ancestors walk with them. There's a lot of power in that because we are part of an ancestral lineage and you can't get away from your DNA. I mean, it's there. And so here we have our ancestors who came before us, particularly if you're a woman, looking at the struggles women have had throughout centuries to be able to come to where we are today. So there's a lot of power in your ancestry. There's a lot of knowledge in your ancestry as well. And it gives you that sense of richness. I like to use the analogy of the beautiful cottonwood tree that grows in the Southwest where I live. And the roots go down as far into the ground as that tree goes up into the sky. And the roots give it nourishment, give it context and environment. The root draws in water. The root is the part that holds that tree up. And so your roots are important. They're what give you that sense of identity, that sense of background. And also a lot of the gifts that we inherit come from our ancestors. But more than that, to me, it's the power, the fact that we have survived and thrived because our ancestors had that sense of we're going to make it, we're going to move forward. Whether you're talking about the pioneers or the people that settled this country by coming across the great ocean. So there's a lot in that, and a lot of people, a lot of the cultures do it. A lot of the cultures have that sense of connection to the past and then the present, and then it helps you focus on a future because you have that sense of continuity.
It gives a lot of beauty and strength to that diversity that you talk about. Juana, you also mentioned Si Se Puede leadership. What is that?
Yes. Well, it's what folks were talking about in their group names. Si Se Puede was coined by Dolores Huerta, who is the most renowned Latina leader of the last century. She worked hand in hand with Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez's day and his birthday is coming up on March 30th. And he was also a very spiritual leader as well as a leader that helped the farm workers. And, as he got older, and I had the privilege of meeting him twice, he began to cast his nets very wide, which is, I think, what leaders need to do. He started talking about the insecticides that were used in the fields and how it was poisoning all of America's children to try to get people to have a sense that what one does for one affects the other. And so his leadership, which Dolores Huerta coined, "Si se puede," yes we can. And if people can remember, that was also Obama's presidential campaign, "Yes we can." And the operative there is we. It's not "yes I can," it's "yes we can." So it's a collective sense of the power of people when they work together with a focused agenda and vision. And so, "Yes, we can" was also a rallying cry for people who wanted to help the farm workers. I'm speaking this week to the National Association on Bilingual Education. Think about how important education is and how we need to invest more in education because our children are the future. And if they're not educated, or if we continue with this idea that our children are in debt when they want to go to college, and I have to say, I worked my way through college. You could do that in the old days. Si Se Puede leadership says, no, we have to change certain things so that we can have the building blocks in place to have a better future, but more than that, to take care of the younger generation. So Si Se Puede is an activist form of leadership in a sense. It says, yes, we want to participate. We understand that many good things are going on, but what are the things as leaders that we need to change in order to create better organizations, a better society, better educational systems? And I know that Greater Washington encourages people to serve on nonprofit boards, to get involved in their community. One of the principles of leadership I work with also is called leadership by the many, or the critical mass theory of leadership as well. So you have Si Se Puede with yes, we can change things, and yes, leadership by the many, which is what our leadership programs do. They bring people together to have them understand that working together, we can promote these changes.
So is it that the people who are suited to that get you mentioned this, and I want to highlight something, whether we see in LGW or you participated in Denver in the leadership program. Is it that the people who are attracted to this type of leadership get engaged and lead this way, or are there ways where we can get more people to understand the benefits of the type of leadership you're talking about, Juana?
Well, I think it's both. I've spent a lot of times working with leadership programs and starting leadership programs because all of us who've been through the process understand how important that is, right? And so I think that's the kind of work that Greater Washington's doing and the different leadership programs across the country are really important. And most of them, at least, have a service component, whether it's group projects or individuals working on things, or whether it's mentoring other people, which is really important. So when I ran the National Hispano Leadership Institute, people had to mentor two younger people, and then they had to work on a project, either a project that they really had a passion for or a team project that they brought together, because that's the payback. I went through a leadership program, wonderful. Okay, what's the payback? The payback is that I'm going to get involved in my community, that I'm going to play it forward. And so I think most leadership programs have that. And yes, we should encourage people to get involved in the community and to participate in leadership programs. And if they can't do that, people that work in corporations, I've worked a lot with ERGs, with employee resource groups, which is another way to get involved. A lot of them have service attached, but they also try to bring a more diverse and inclusive corporation. They try to bring their values into the corporation to get more influence, to get more impact, to get more visibility. So I think there is that power of leadership of the many, that power of numbers, and that leadership programs train you to do that. So yes, let's get involved. Let's invite other people. They say people need to be invited and asked to participate. So whenever we're doing something, let's see if we can bring people in and really give them an opportunity to see the benefits of collaboration and working with others.
That's an outstanding way to describe the impact that the leadership program can have as we bring more people to it. Now, oftentimes I'm asked, okay, this makes sense on the community perspective. How can the leaders involved in Leadership Greater Washington take this mindset into their organizations, Juana? I know whether in your own work with CLC, you work on the organizational leadership level as well. How can the mindset that you talk about be implemented in organizational leadership?
Well, one of the things we just talked about were employee resource groups. So if you're in a corporation, that especially some of the women's organizations, the African American, the Latino, I mean, now they have a whole spectrum, everything from veterans organizations to even millennials and Z's are forming young people's organizations. I think we are going through people wanting to have a deeper identity of who am I, a deeper dive into, who am I, what can I contribute? And I think that's an important piece because you have to know yourself and be secure in yourself before you can really join with groups. But I think in corporations, the most important thing we can do is to emphasize the power of teamwork, to invite people, like to say, when you're working on a project, wouldn't it be great to have Maria or John or Steve on this team because they're going to bring X, Y, and Z. Again, to sponsor and mentor people, to open doors for them, to introduce them to others, to realize that your power really comes from people. There's an adage in people of color is that leadership is bestowed on you. It comes from the people you serve. And so again, understanding that the more people that you work with and collaborate with, the better leadership you're going to have. And I think also, I've been working with corporations that are doing leadership internally in the organization. And so everything you can do to bring that sense of collaboration, of learning together, of bringing people to the table, of having an inclusive open door policy rather than a lot of silos, doing cross-functional teamwork, that whole sense of building a more fluid organization where people are brought together. And I think, because especially millennials and Zs have kind of grown up with that kind of a mindset where they move from project to project, and that they're used to handling a more diverse sense of how they work and projects that they're in. So I think all of those things can help you build. And at the same time, 40% of your leadership effectiveness comes from who you know and who supports you, and who thinks that you have a lot of contributions to make, a lot of skills. So the more you build your network, the more powerful you become as a leader, but also the more inclusive the organization becomes.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference whether it is in organizations like LGW or within an organization or in the community as well. Because you talk about that personal and collective purpose. I want to connect that to that search for purpose that you talk about, the fact that it exists in many communities of color. How can leaders tap into more of that purpose, both within themselves and their teams and organizations?
Yeah, I wanted to do a little caveat on the last question, by the way, and give you an example. I worked for several years with the Chevron Corporation on building their Hispanic ERG, and they had a 5,000% increase in participation. And then they started doing programs and started doing leadership, and all of a sudden we had promotions as well. And so I think this whole idea of bringing people together within an organization is so important. So I do a lot of work on what's called destino, or your destiny. And Latinos believe that each person is totally unique. We're a one of a kind design, I like to say. And so, the first thing in leadership is know yourself, and then know your people, of course, but know yourself. Who am I? Why am I called to leadership? What are my gifts? Even the fact that I was the youngest daughter in a large Latino family made it so that I could become educated and be here with you today. Even the fact that I'm an immigrant and was born at the time when the women's movement was starting, and the Latinos were beginning. We didn't even have an identity till 1977. So I grew up at a time when there wasn't even an identity. Even the fact that I grew up at a time of civil rights, and I was able to march to integrate my university. My university was segregated when I started college. So you go back and you reflect on your life, and you look at the skills and talent you're born with. And of course, leadership programs do really well at that, at giving you some assessment tools. You can see I'm an extrovert, so I can use those skills in my leadership. Our introverts get a chance to reflect and think, plan and strategize, and really keep us on the right path. So knowing yourself and who you are, where you were born, what are the gifts you were given, inside, Robert Greenleaf, when he wrote The Servant as Leader, said the intuitive part of you is the most powerful part of your leadership. So learning to pay attention to yourself. What is it that you know, like for me, this whole idea of creating a multicultural, diverse society, that motivates me. So what are your aspirations? What's your vision for what you'd like to do? Your purpose is also organic. As you serve, as you grow, as you take leadership programs, as you read books, as you grow your network, your capacity to serve and to be all that you could be grows. And remember, we don't use that much of our brain. We're only supposedly using about 85%. So you have an incredible capacity to grow and to be a stronger and more adept leader. So in my book, The Power of Latino Leadership, I have a chapter on Destino that begins with your legacy and your history and who your parents were. It goes on to your skills and talents. Goes a really important one, by the way, that you could do today is look at a time that opportunity knocked, because that was your purpose going, hey, pay attention. And I always use one of them that I can use is that I had been running a women's center for 10 years, Mi Casa Women's Center, and I'm very proud of it because it's now the largest organization in Colorado that serves Latinos. And I was sitting there going like, I could be here the rest of my life. And women would still be coming, needing jobs, needing Spanish. Kids would still be dropping out of school. We would still, what is the solution? And so my intuition said leadership. If you can get people to change the structures and the public policies that create these problems of children not getting a good education, you could solve some of these issues. And as I was thinking about that, and this is the truth, I got a call from the Adolph Coors Company, which was the biggest employer in Colorado. You all know Coors beer, who said they had met with a group of Latinos and that what they thought was needed was a leadership program for Latino women. So look at opportunity knocking. That counselor that said to you, you can go to college. That coach that said to you, wow, you really have a skill here. The way you work with the team, the fact that you never give up. Look back and see what is it your parents told you. And because like the roots of the tree we talked about, those are your roots, and they're growing you right now into being all that you can be. And I think that's the ultimate purpose of leadership, really, for you, is that, who am I and how can I really exercise that I don't know if it's a spiritual thing, but you were born with a seed, and how can I make that seed grow, flourish, and really have a life of purpose?
Those are beautiful words, Juana, and really important for all of us. It's incredible. In all of my years working in leadership development, one of the biggest challenges I see at all levels of organizations is for us and for leaders to get to know themselves and for us to get to know ourselves. And I would encourage everyone listening to this, watching this, to take that challenge on. Don't just assume I know myself. I think we have big blind spots. We need to uncover them. We need to get to know ourselves better. And a lot of times, the more experience we have, and the higher up sometimes people move in status in organizations or power positions, the less they end up getting to know
Right.
themselves.
Well, that's why authenticity is such an important thing in leadership. Because if people, first of all, if people don't know who you are, how are they going to relate to you as a leader? I mean, it's better to know, that your leader likes things on time. You got to know that, right? So, so that sense of authenticity, there's a great quote by Frances Hesselbein, who was an incredible leader. She led the Girl Scouts and did all this work in diversity. And she said, leadership is how to be, not how to do it. See, when you follow a leader, not because they're the organizational leader, because a lot of times that's not who you're following. You're following a leader who knows how to be, who's authentic, who can communicate with you, who has an investment in you, who's looking out for you, who may say, here's a project that really is going to help you grow and learn, and who's looking for developmental opportunities for you. And so leadership really is, another fabulous quote was from Robert Greenleaf in The Servant Leader. And this is really heavy, so people take a breath. He said, we have been called to leadership so we can heal ourselves. Isn't that beautiful? So that as you grow in your leadership, as you become more magnanimous, more authentic, you're healing yourself. In other words, you're becoming what you can be. So that's why James McGregor Burns called leadership a process of transformation. He said the real leader will transform the organization they work for. They'll transform the people that they work with. But more than that, they will transform themselves.
That was so powerful, and I love those quotes, Juana. Really, really important for us to keep that in mind as we are leading ourselves before we lead others and organizations. Now, you have spent a lot of time focused on Latino leadership. Your book is on the power of Latino leadership. And there are a couple of those elements that I want to touch on, including the fact many people might be familiar with this, but I am surprised at how few sometimes of the people I interact with are, that you say Latinos are multicultural, folks.
Oh, yes, we are. I am French, Spanish, Indian, and of course, American. But the thing is a fourth of Latinos are Afro Latinos, that they come from the Dominican Republic and Cuba and Puerto Rico. And An interesting fact is that only 5% of the slave trade came to the United States. The rest of them are our relatives south of the border in Brazil and Colombia. And so anyway, so we do have an Afro-Latino flair. Another quarter of us are still indigenous because Latinos are a mixture between the European, mainly the Spanish, and the indigenous people of this hemisphere. So we're mixed people, we're mestizos, and about 35% of us are already identifying as multicultural or mixed. By the way, half of the youth in America under 18 identify as multicultural. So a lot of my work is getting people to understand that the biggest, our next step in evolution as a human species is to become multicultural. You can't stop it because of globalization, because of technology, because of immigration, because we're mixed now. I mean, we've been on the planet a long time. And so Latinos are a prototype for that because we're indigenous, we're white, there's like 40% of us that say, yeah, I got European blood. So we're all the races, and we come from 26 countries. And so we're a global international community as well. And so it's been difficult for Latinos to form a united identity because of our immense diversity and also because of our growth. We contributed 51% of the growth in the last decade. But here's what I want you to know if you're not Latino, that Latinos are a culture, not a race. And so we are really united by our history, by our common ancestry, but also by a set of dynamic values that most of you know, mi casa su casa, which means generosity and sharing and collaboration, hard work. Latinos have the highest participation in the labor market, and we are going to be 78% of the new entries into the labor market in the next decade. So pay attention to Latinos because we love to work. Work to us is a way we contribute, and that's what's important, is how do we contribute? The idea that every individual is unique, but also that you have to respect people. There's an incredible amount of respeto, a certain amount of humility with Latinos because, we have that sense of respect for others. And you can't keep a collaborative culture like ours together if you don't have a real desire for people to help each other, to collaborate, and also to tell the truth, because we have a whole thing about respecting and telling the truth and fulfilling your responsibilities. So everybody can be a Latino if they'd like. We call it becoming a Latino by corazón, because Latinos have what's called a bienvenido or inclusive spirit, because we are so diverse and we come from so many places. In my family, everybody's there, not just a Spaniard, a Colombian, a Cuban, the Irish, the English. We are a multicultural family. And so I think Latinos offer a pathway to developing the new multicultural society that's emerging now and that our children want to be a part of.
You actually had posted something on LinkedIn on Irish Latinos, Juana.
Yes, I just did. Well, the Irish are very beloved by the Mexicans, especially because they fought in the Mexican War on our side. So there's this whole Patricios, the Patricios or the Patricios Brigade. There's a stamp to the Irish. There's also a monument to the Irish. So the Irish come over here and they said, wow, we're going to fight with the Mexicans because they have big families. They love to celebrate life. They're Catholic and they're fighting for their freedom. That sounds Irish. So my daughter's name is Carmen O'Connor. I have to confess, I married an Irishman. So the Irish are not English, they came from a different tradition and they have had problems with oppression as well. So yeah, and you can look at all of these connections. We need to start looking at how we're connected as humanity. What are the common bonds we have? We all want a better future. We all want what's best for our children. We all want to live in a clean earth, that will be here for generations to come. We don't want violence in our schools, in our churches, in our restaurants, in our theaters. So we have some common things that we can come together on to create a better future. And I think that the real purpose of diversity and inclusion should be that.
Yeah, so as we continue, I think you do need to press your
Yeah,
Share
somebody's doing that to me. Doug, can you get me back on?
video again, and it's Jasmine. Can get
Oh,
you back on.
Jasmine, I'm sorry.
But as I can hear you, and we're capturing audio as well as you come back. So you mentioned this, but you also mentioned there's one thing I want to touch on before then getting some summarizing and concluding thoughts from you. You talk about the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation
Yes.
as we move forward, and I think that point, Juana, is essential because there is a lot of anxiety in the community. There are a lot more tensions that I am seeing that shouldn't be there. So what is the role of the forgiveness and reconciliation that you talk about in us being able to move forward as this multicultural society and then organizations as you talk about?
Well, I think in the Latino community there is some of that, but I think there's such a pull for the future, with the children, because we are such a we're also the youngest population in America. And so we have so many of our youth that we need to be thinking about. And so I want to offer people this, if you're really thinking about the future, there has to be forgiveness and reconciliation. And the main thing is not to continue the white privilege or the dominance or the hierarchy or the exclusion. If we can make a commitment to beginning to be inclusive, to look at the talents. Now, each culture and each race has something to contribute to humanity. We need to look at these as assets, as things that people are bringing to the table that are going to expand everybody's consciousness and ability to be a better leader and to be more of who they are. And so forgiveness, first of all, when you forgive, you're really forgiving yourself, because a lot of times, if it's personal, the person that, all of us have had in our career people that didn't treat us with the kind of respect, or even were I focused and didn't promote us as they were promoting themselves. And so we have to sit back and let that go, because if we don't let go, we can't let in. We have to let go to make room for new growth and new understanding. And many times people didn't, maybe they didn't know what they were doing, but we don't know their intention. We do know that we have to forgive them. And a lot of times that forgiveness, for example, this is a beautiful thing from my multicultural work. The Cherokee Indians at the beginning of the year would go down to the river and they would pick up water and swirl it around them and say, I'm forgiving, I'm forgiving, I'm forgiving everybody who hurt me in the last year. That cleanses you. That makes you more powerful. You don't have to carry this baggage, because that is gone. The past is gone. The only thing we can do is learn from it, figure out how that has made us a better leader. And some of my work says that if you look at the biggest crises you've had, when people have really messed with you, that's when you grew. That's when you became a better leader. That's when I said, for instance, that working for a nonprofit, I've had my own business since the 90s, because it's easier for me to do my work without having a board that I have to report to, and having instead collaborators that work with me towards a common future. And I learned that from running nonprofits for 35 years. I didn't want to run that anymore, because it was too much, too many cooks in the pot. I love nonprofits, don't get me wrong. I work with them and everything else, but I think I can do more work. And that's when I started writing and able to do more focused work on what I wanted to contribute. So the other thing is, the Day of Atonement the Jews have, where you do the same thing. The Catholics had confession. You've got to let go of stuff, both what you feel you could have done better, you learned, you move on. That's what makes a leader, by the way, by definition. Leaders are lifelong learners. They learn from the mistakes. When they make a mistake, they're a better leader because they learned from it. And so we do that, and we do the same with other people, because in reality, we're carrying the baggage, not the person that did us wrong. And sometimes to thank them for the opportunity to become a better leader. I have someone right now that I know you can't believe this, but doesn't really want my wisdom and mentorship.
Oh no!
And she's a younger person, and this is happening with millennials and different generations. And I just have to say, bless her. I hope she finds her way, and I'm here if she ever wants to come back. Boom, it's over. Women have a hard time with this a lot of times. People that don't have power, we carry these grudges, but we just, it's just not good for us. And when we get back to you being the leader, number one, take care of yourself. And just as I just went on a 3-day fast to clean up and to be healthy. Just as you would do something like that, do the same thing with your mind. Clear it and let it go.
All outstanding advice for us as we lead, Juana. Now I want to bring the conversation to a close with all the wonderful thoughts, all the wonderful work you've done, and the great thoughts that you've shared both in this conversation and in your book, The Power of Latino Leadership. You share brilliant insights that come from deep within, from those roots of the ancestors through you to us. So I've really enjoyed it myself. And I'm sure, I know I've gotten lots of feedback on the podcast conversation, and we will on this, in this conversation as well. But your thoughts, Juana, for leadership, Greater Washington leaders, again, your summarizing thoughts as we look to lead ourselves, our teams, and organizations and have a greater impact in the community. What would you challenge us with in a hopeful, optimistic way? Because there are people that I run into that feel drained, feel overburdened, higher levels of anxiety. So, what would you leave us with so we are energized and we can pull power from the Latino leadership that you share to make a better and more impactful difference?
Well, one thing about my work in communities of color, and my first book was about Black, Latino, and American Indian leadership. And then I've done a lot of work on women's leadership. And then the new book has a chapter on intergenerational leadership and how we can build this intergenerational force. I want to tell you, in 7 years, millennials and Zs will be the majority of the electorate. So this transition in leadership and bringing young people, mentoring young people, having programs for young people is so important. So I would I would say the first thing is excuse me, is to realize how far we've come. I mean, when we look at how far we have come, not just as a species, as a country, when we look at how far women have come, when we look at civil rights, when we look at the new generation, when we look at the magnificence of technology that we're doing right now, we have to build on that. And we have to, again, look at that positive resources that we have, the skills. One of the things when you look at leadership in communities of color, think about it, through slavery, through colonization, through women not even having the right to vote or own property. Think of all the things that we have overcome. So people of color and women have unique ways of leading that got us to where we are. So inclusive leadership is not just a good idea. People have talents and backgrounds and abilities that need to be integrated into our society and into our communities, particularly the idea that all of these cultures cared about people. They were we-centered cultures. And that's what's missing today. The whole idea that we must take care of our people, whether it's youth, whether it's college debt, which I find, I just saw something on that last night. Whether it's the fact that my family, my immigrant family, could buy a home in 1950 because working class people could own a home. So we have a lot of things that we can build on and say, no, we cannot, to have that vision of that more shared and inclusive and a society that's based on parity, not on privilege. And that's going to make us all better. That's going to make it much more exciting. And by the way, that's where your children want to go. they are going to go there, and we need to help them get there. So I think it's an exciting time to be living. I think it's, we have some incredible things, hurdles to overcome. And that's why getting more and more people involved in leadership is so important in civic engagement, because we cannot do this unless we have a critical mass of people that are ready to build a new century. So congratulations to all of you that are doing it. That's the first thing, is to say thank you to all of you. Gracias and saying thank you is one of the most powerful leadership tools you can have.
Well, thank you, Dr. Juana Bordas. Such a joy hearing from you your optimism in that we have come a long way, and in moving forward, we need even more of that we leadership and we perspective rather than the I leadership and I perspective. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with the Leadership Greater Washington community. Thank you, Dr. Juana Bordas.
Well, here's to all of you. And by the way, being in Washington's even more important. It's the seat of power. So thank you all for all of your work and for being, part of this incredible change in the universe that's taking place today. Namaste.
Wonderful. Thank you.